Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Roanoke Valley Libertarians online discussion with the CEO of Crowds on Demand, Adam Swart. Since you've started the company this past year, it says it's had a 400% increase in protest requests since in like DC since Donald Trump came into office, and now it says that you're out talking about it because this has been a big subject that people since 2020, I guess the summer of love. You know, people were talking about there was paid protesters out there, there were bricks being dropped off. So let's start. How are you doing today?
Hey, thanks so much for being for having me here. A little bit of information about my company. We've been around 13 years, so we were started in 2012. We have obviously expanded since then, both in terms of our nationwide reach, but also in terms of our capabilities. And we've also expanded in regards to a lot of the types of things that we take on and the tactics that we use. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about kind of the history of protests in the United States, kind of unpacking how all of that works.
Okay, excellent. So you said, I was reading, it said that you started Crowds on Demand while you were at UCLA. What moment did you realize that this could actually become a real company? Was there a trigger, or was there an event that you said, let's rally people?
Well, basically the trigger was seeing how difficult it is to get people out at events, right? Is that coming into this, it was so difficult to get people out to a lot of these events, particularly political events. Seeing that, observing that, it kind of gave me the inspiration, like, hey, what if we put a bunch of these out of work actors in LA? This was where I started the business, to work, kind of attending protests, attending these gatherings, right? Because it was so difficult to get people out there. A lot of the people running campaigns, you know, in the early 2010s when I started the business, were people who had come of age politically in the 60s, where you could put a few flyers on the quad and you get tens of thousands of students out there, right? But this is a new kind of generation and a new way of doing things, and that you need to kind of provide that incentive. Now, we've kind of changed our tactics since then, where now the people who we provide at events are people who are otherwise passionate about the subject. It's not, we're not providing people who are just random and don't care. We're providing people who are passionate.
Okay. What was the very first paid crowd gig that you ever booked?
Well, actually, what's interesting is a lot of publicity is around how we started this, or, you know, it was inspired politically, but a lot of the initial gigs and a lot of our business still is doing kind of corporate PR stunts. So you're outside a conference or a convention and you actually want to do like kind of a wild display to advertise your company's services, you know, advertise what you're doing, especially when you have entrenched competitors.
Right. By doing that, I've watched several of your interviews on the different, like Fox and NewsNation. I know they were linked, and then on YouTube. How are you received with this type of stuff? Just out of curiosity, I mean, do people frown? It seemed like they frowned upon it, but how do you feel that you did?
Well, look, I think it's a good question. Part of why I'm going on the media is to try my best to change the perception of what this is. I think it's one of those things where there's a gut instinct in us that says paying protesters is bad. But when you actually unpack it, it makes a lot more sense, right? So you've heard my interviews with other people, so you know what I'm going to say, which is number one, that it's actually an ethical thing to compensate people for going out because it democratizes who can actually come out to a protest, right? Whereas if you don't compensate people, you're going to have people who are disproportionately retired, disproportionately college students, people who have a low opportunity cost of going to a protest, right? Whereas what we do is by compensating people, we compensate people enough to compensate for their expenses, but not so much that they would abandon their convictions.
Right. Okay. It says your site now does more than protests. Can you talk about some of the campaigns that you're like you were talking about? I think it said flash mobs and things of that nature. Is that the other things that your company
Yeah,
now?
so corporate PR stunts, we do so we do corporate kind of PR stunts, like I was saying, if you want to generate a buzz at a conference. We also do phone banking, emailing, right? So like let's just say you're trying to lobby the local county supervisors about something, we would do that. We also do um we also do canvassing. We do all kinds of things such as creating advocacy groups from the ground up, right? So it's not just providing the people, but we create a whole movements, right, from the ground up. So it's kind of an effective thing to do.
Okay. So is that? I guess everything has its like being a protester is a. This is what you get for being a protester. Being on phones is this what you get, and then
Yeah.
actually knocking on doors. I guess everything is.
Well, yeah, there's certainly different jobs that aren't necessarily going to be treated different the same way, right? I would argue being a protester is harder than, for example, sitting in an audience. So, for example, we provide audiences. So let's just say you're worried your event is going to be like there's no one going to show up, and you're doing a big product launch, and you need 200 people there. We could provide those 200 people. Now, sitting in an audience for a press conference is a lot easier than waving signs out on a street when it's minus 10 degrees outside. So obviously those will probably be paid a little bit differently.
Okay, yeah, you're right. What's the most creative or craziest request a client has ever made for you that you've actually accepted?
Oh, we staged a wedding. We literally staged the wedding from the ground up because we had this girl who was maybe not exactly the most reputable girl who was marrying a wealthy gentleman from abroad, and they were worried that the family wouldn't approve of her family and her friends. So we actually provided family and friends that were kind of stand-ins for her, right? And people who look more like young professionals, right? And we even provided aunts and uncles and even the father of the bride so that she looked a little bit more credible. So we provided a little bit of a better context to that. I mean, that was pretty absurd if you think about it, right? Like your guests at your own wedding were essentially compensated.
Right. Now, what's the smallest amount of people I like? Did she go, "Hey, I want a massive wedding," or this could be protesters too?
Yeah.
What's the smallest amount that I could request, and what's like the largest that you think you could provide? Whichever.
The largest goes into the tens of thousands and can be at tens of thousands of people in multiple states. As you can imagine, that's not a large percentage of our business due to the high cost involved, right? Our average requests tend to be between 25 to 50, maybe 100, 250. Like we don't do that much over 500 people, right? So conversely, though we can provide smaller groups, like sometimes, especially if it's a more sustained thing, like, hey, I want 5 people to stand outside this office every day for a month, right? Well, we can do that. We don't, I typically say the lowest is 2 because I don't really like to do 1 because it's a little lonely to be just by yourself, but we can provide 2. That's kind of rare because I think there's different types of things that would call critical mass to actually make a decent protest. So 5 is one critical mass, right? Okay, 5 has your attention, 10 is more attention, 20, okay, that's a real protest, right? 50, that's like a solid protest. 100, that starts to get large. So at each point, it's like more and more impactful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, Real quick, and I didn't. I saw that I believe it said that you helped Jerry Brown
That's
when
right.
you came into it. Were you are you do you have a political leaning that you go towards? Just
No,
I know you do it for.
not anymore. I was a Democrat, to be sure, and you're a libertarian, right? So you understand aligning with either Republicans or Democrats, right? And I certainly don't. We work with Republicans and we work with Democrats. If you're asking, especially when they're on the side of common sense, right? So I don't have to agree with you 100% to take on your cause. So a great example would be the cryptocurrency industry. I've worked with a lot of cryptocurrency companies over the last about 8 years or so. And when I started working with them, I didn't really know much about cryptocurrency, but I knew that they were the underdog because the banks, the large institutions were really treating them very roughly. And they, the lobbyists and all of the institutional power structures were against them. So they really needed this sort of unconventional advocacy that we were able to provide, even though I wasn't 100% pro crypto, and I'm not like a ultra crypto person, right? So that's a good example of, I don't have to agree with you 100%, but for example, I vociferously oppose the defund the police movement. So I would never work for a defund the police campaign because it's so counter to my values, right? But so we'll work with Republicans, we'll work with Democrats where it makes sense. Regardless, we keep everyone's information confidential.
Right. And the reason I asked that is because I could, like when you're on Fox, I know everyone's going to think it, well, you must be Democrat. And then if you're on MSNBC or MS Now, I guess it's called, CNN, they're going to say, oh, you must lean this way. And then it's never the case, if they already come in with this perception. Because like for myself, here in my state, if I say, hey, let's advocate, oh, well, you're taking votes from the Republican Party. You're taking votes from, or if I'm in a blue city, then you're taking votes from the Democrat.
That's right.
It always depends on which channel you're on. Wherever I'm standing is who I'm taking votes, supposedly taking votes.
Yeah, that's understandable. That's understandable. And as if to deprive you of agency, as if you're not your own man, right? But I also would say that from my perspective, we work with both parties. With a lot of names that people would recognize, and that's fine. Right now, I think you kind of alluded to it in a previous question, which is, okay, how is the perception of our services? And I think that we keep our clients confidential in some cases because they request it, and in other cases it's because there's a certain negative element that comes with what we do that I am looking to undo. Right? Because the reality is every protest is a paid protest in one way or another. If you're a labor union doing a protest, your members are only there because they're told to be there. And if they don't go there, they're going to get a crappy shift. And if they do, they're going to get rewarded professionally, right? If you see Ted Cruz or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is that who you have in the background there? Is that her?
That's her. War. It says war underneath because.
Right. So if AOC or Ted Cruz is hosting a rally in Washington, D.C., the people standing behind them are people who work for them. They're actually staff members. There's 15,000 Capitol Hill staff members on the Republican and Democratic side. So I think that a lot of people want to pretend and actually, in a way, give me more credit than I'm due and say, oh, well, what you're doing is really bad and you're corrupting the politics, when in the reality, what I'm actually doing is democratizing things and allowing everybody to get compensated for showing up in furtherance of a political objective. Right.
What's the percentage of in your business, political versus corporate PR entertainment? How's it broke down right now? Because what you're saying is absolutely. Go ahead.
It really depends by the year. It really depends on the year. Sometimes politics has become like a majority of our business, other times not. My goal is actually for politics to not be a majority of my business. It's become big because so many people are increasing number of well-to-do people are extremely interested in politics in a way that wasn't true 10 years ago. So I think that a lot more interest has come from politics, but honestly, we rarely work with politicians. We mostly work with issue groups, right? Oh, we don't want more taxes. We want to shut down this power plant that's really bad for our city. Whatever, like issues, not Democrat, Republican. But I'll tell you the causes that I want to work with, because those are like, just so that in the interest of full disclosure, these are the campaigns I want to run. Number one, addressing the social media addiction, right? Social media is a cancer on our society, and those companies must be reined in. They're destroying this country. I know a lot of people with Trump derangement syndrome, and I know a lot of people with Trump attachment syndrome, right? People whose lives have been ruined, whose family lives have been ruined by social media because they've become kind of gone down like rabbit holes, and it's nuts, right? Number one. So number one is social media companies. They need to be reined in. And you're a libertarian, so I know you favor kind of free speech, which I do too. And I 100% favor free speech. I don't think we should ban those platforms, but their very highly paid lobbyists have negotiated certain immunities for the company under certain codes where they're not liable. They can't be sued for certain things that happen under their platform. All I think is that we need to do away with that. You know what I mean? If we do away with that, then we're going to have a lot better results. They have too much immunity, so which is actually an example of government regulation, if you see what I'm saying. Because when one group gets immunity and the other group doesn't, that's actually government regulation, and the government picking winners and losers, if you see what I'm saying.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so that's number one. Number two, I want to take on the processed food industry. Coca-Cola, McDonald's, that's poisoning. They've killed more black people than the Ku Klux Klan did with processed food. I mean, these people are guilty of the murder of many black people. I mean, also whites and other races, but they target, like, if you go to see McDonald's ads, like, it feels like all of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have black people in them disproportionately. Black people are like 12% of the population, 13%. And yet I feel like every time I see a McDonald's ad, it's always black people that are in the ads. Why? Because they're trying to get black people more addicted to this stuff. These are chemically engineered things that are engineered to kind of get you addicted and then kind of get you coming there twice, 3 times a day even. So they're more addictive than cigarettes in some ways, in my opinion. Third is make our cities better. I know my libertarian friends don't agree with me on this, but I love trains, buses, public transportation. I'm like very parks. Like, I love all of these things, and our cities have unfortunately become overrun with kind of drug addicts and who are actually making life so terrible for people. We need to like completely get rid of this. We need to like, and it's not about government versus not government, because I know I'm on a libertarian talk show, but on the other hand, when drug addicts are terrorizing the community, that they're not kind of existing merely within their rights. This is actually abridging the rights of other people. So we got to let them know you can get treatment that should be paid for and that should be humane and in very pleasant conditions, or get the hell out of our cities. You know what I mean? And stay the hell out of our communities across the country, even outside the cities, because because we don't want that. So those are my 3 priorities, and I'm looking specifically to take on campaigns that align with those priorities.
Okay. Now, I tell you, the one thing at the Libertarian Party, and I've said and I've stressed to many people, like you're talking about the drugs, for instance, there's almost nothing I wouldn't legalize. And,
Yeah.
But I think we've done such a poor job. We just say that, and then we just throw it out there. And then there's consequences when you do different drugs. And I get it. Marijuana and beer, or alcohol, they're low, but they can cause a big problem. So we got to address that. And sometimes I think libertarians will just go, like you said, oh, let's get rid of the police and we'll have a paid security force. And it's like, well, who's going to be that paid security force?
How is any of that going to work? And
Yes.
that's a challenge you get into with libertarians, because I'm very sympathetic to libertarian views, because I generally don't want the government to mess with people. I'm very big on civil rights and people being afforded all the dignities in the world. My challenge is the most libertarian country in the world is Lebanon, right? If you want power on, you better pay the guy at the power company, right? Because otherwise you're not going to have power. You better have your own generator, right? You want clean water, you better have your own filtration systems. You want to be safe, you better hire private security, right? So Lebanon is sort of a libertarian. I mean, I don't presume to know how taxes are collected there, but I'm guessing if you don't want to pay, you don't pay, right? If you're important enough, you probably don't pay. And if there's anyone who works for the Lebanese government watching this, and I'm wrong, please correct me. I apologize. But I've been to Lebanon, and this was my impression of Lebanon, as it was a libertarian country. Whatever you want, you better pay for yourself, right? So the challenge is that, and a great example of this that I always point out is in 2020, there was a port explosion, right? Where they had all these like very dangerous, flammable goods that were in a warehouse at the port. Well, would that happen here in the United States? Probably not, because we have port authorities whose job it is to monitor, to decide what is or is not allowed in the port, right? And we have inspectors, and we have a functioning system there to ensure that, okay, what is allowed or not allowed in our facilities, right? So Lebanon doesn't have that. So as a result, there was this huge explosion at the port of Beirut that killed thousands of people, and that really like traumatized the city for like a long period of time with all these toxic fumes. So my challenge to libertarians is that we need to get you need to kind of explain how this will work more effectively, right? And I hate to say argue for gradualism, but gradualism is important. And for libertarians to say, okay, let's try it with one department at a time and see how we do.
I totally agree with you on that. Larry Sharp, when he talks about he's going to be he's the nominee for the Libertarian Party in New York. He's going to be running for governor. And I know when he was discussing, like, let's say breaking down the Department of Education, you have like a tier system. You can just go in there and shut it down, but then it throws everything into a tailspin. And like Social Security, I think Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and
Sure.
I would love to see it change, but we've got to discuss it. We can't just go in Social Security because they think I'm putting grandma and grandpa and everyone on the street. But in reality, we're got a collision course coming, and something's going to have to change. Otherwise, we all lose. So in turn, let's do it. And I think that's where libertarians have failed. So
yeah, and they failed to kind of explain the agenda better, and I think that you've had a lot of so I completely agree with all of that. But I think that libertarians are an important force in the ecosystem politically, because you need to have someone who demands answers for why do we have this agency? Why do we have that agency? I forget exactly how many, but I read there are over 100 armed law enforcement agencies in Washington, D.C. alone, right? I mean, that's an insane number of law enforcement agencies, all who have some degree of jurisdiction, all who are weaponized, all who we are paying to some degree, right? We as the taxpayers, right? So it's reasonable to ask why we have that, and to ask each agency to explain why we need it and why they can't merge with some other agency, right? And create some efficiencies right within these agencies.
Right. You said with let's say we were talking about social media a few minutes ago, and how has the rise of like TikTok and short form video changed the ways that you design, or you design your protest or stunts that you may do? Do you
Well,
focus
it's
in on
very
social?
so yeah, it's a really good question, and the answer, candidly, Brian, is that we're still working on tailoring that, right? Because when we started the business, so much of our protests were focused on traditional media, right? The 5 o'clock news, for a local protest, or obviously national news for like larger protests, right? But now there is the ability to kind of go viral with social media, but it also creates more noise and echo chambers. So getting your getting what you're trying to do across is hard. So on the one hand, getting the word across to a particular echo chamber is easier than it's been before, right? So if I'm saying I want to make sure that the video game community hears about something that I'm doing, I can do that, right? But if it makes it hard when your goal is a mass, more nationwide um objective, because it's so much harder to do that now, because there's so much news, and I'm sure you've noticed this within your life, is I'll mention some what I think is a big story to somebody who's but that other person is either a right wing or left wing echo chamber, and they're like, oh, I've never heard about this, and it's like, well, this was huge news in what I've seen, but it's not in what you've seen.
Right. And with so many social media,
Although, by the
uh,
way, if I could add one more thing, though, Brian,
yeah,
is one advantage of a protest, though, is that we're reaching people in person. So in that sense, we can transcend the echo chambers. So when it comes to online and how it's viewed in
right,
media, mass media, social media, is harder to control. But if you are walking by a protest and you see respectful, articulate protesters handing out flyers and conveying their views, then that is actually, it doesn't matter whether you would have seen it online or not. We can reach you that way, right? And you can judge for yourself based on what you can see with your very own eyes. So there is a value in this era where we're so saturated with our phones or computers, iPads, all kinds of things, smartwatches. Now protest is a way, or in-person events are a way to actually reach people that transcends those sort of barriers.
oh yeah. Because I was going to say, we have now so many social media apps. Like I'm part of the American Legion and AMVETS and Libertarian, and it's like you to get to reach the different kids or younger folks or different people, you have to be on all these different social media, and it becomes exhausting because
Yeah.
I don't know how to I know I'm not using Facebook to the best of its ability, but now
Yeah.
Facebook's for the old people. It's TikTok and Snapchat and whatever else. And then I don't
Yeah.
like getting into Truth Social because, like you said, it's an echo chamber. I don't want to hear just right. I like hearing a different side so to try to change. Like, here's my idea, change my mind, and if you can, then maybe I can make mine better. You know.
Yeah.
Um, has there ever been a campaign where you were hired to end up changing the client's own opinion on the issue? Have,
Uh,
or does that, or even your mind, where you were like, you know, I don't really believe in this, but then you see the protest.
where my opinion was changed. Oh, yes. So I can't speak to my clients' opinions, but
Okay,
certainly my opinions have changed on a lot of issues once I've hired. And crypto was a good example, but a lot of other issues like that I was not aware of. Like under the Biden administration, we worked with a lot of conservative groups and causes, and I did not realize the extent to which they were kind of debanked and kind of discriminated against by corporate America in the Biden era, right? That like conservative advocacy groups that did not do anything violent, didn't do anything wrong. Maybe they had a message that was offensive to some, but they were denied banking relationships. They were taken off social media. They were essentially like, they were basically left for gone because they were being tried to erased, right? Like the government, it felt like, was trying to erase them, and the government would basically kind of deny responsibility because they would say, oh, well, this was the actions of corporate America, right, of the social media companies or the banks. But so much has emerged to show that the Biden administration pushed those banks and the social media companies to take these actions, right? So and because the government has so much sway over those companies, they did it. So it was more or less the government acting and the government pretending like it was corporate America acting. So it's a big concern, but I also have to say that I condemn that the Trump administration, was doing a lot of these same things, and some of it under the guise of stopping anti-Semitism, which is a really hollow excuse for basically cracking down on critics. So I'm not here to shill for Republicans in any way. I think both parties have really failed on free speech. Trump promised to be a free speech president. I don't think he's lived up to that. So, but I think Biden was one of the most anti-free speech presidents at least in my lifetime. Probably since Franklin Roosevelt, the most anti-free speech president, or at least visibly so. Maybe others took action behind the scenes, but both Biden and Trump have not really been free speech presidents.
Oh yeah. It said that you turned down $1 million. Let's see. You famously turned down millions of dollars to organize an anti-Trump protest after 2016. Is that a true statement? And can you walk us through how did you?
Yeah, it was within the past year. The reason for that, and just to be clear, because everybody was like, "Oh, he turned down like a ludicrous amount of money." Oh, the contract was worth that much. So I just want to say, like, I didn't say no to $20 million for me personally. It was, I would have made some money off the contract, but it was a contract for $20 million. So there's a lot of stuff that circulates on the internet. So I have to address that. But the thing is that the reason I did do that though, was because it was so ineffective that I just felt that I wanted to send a message by publicly refusing this, that the Democrats need to have much better tactics. And if you try the same thing over and over again, which is what they've been doing, oh, Trump's racist, Trump's sexist, Trump's a dictator, whatever, right? And forget whether that's true or not. Maybe it is true. But forget if that is true or not. It's not working. You need to bring in a broader coalition of people, and the Democrats are fundamentally failing on that, right? So that is why I turned it down. You need smarter tactics that go more outside the box.
Right. Well, that makes sense. When you hire a protester, are they allowed to say they're a paid protester, or do you try to have them remain silent? Does that change the view of the protest?
Well, my challenge with that is that I would totally support having all protesters disclose that they're compensated, as long as we extend that to meaning we all have to say our ulterior motives for going to something, right? So if you basically, because the premise of saying, so what's the premise of saying, oh, you have to disclose your pay? The premise is that you have an ulterior motive to attend beyond the fact that that you agree or disagree with that cause, right? So if you're going because you're trying to get laid, because some cute girl is there and you're trying to get laid, I would consider that an ulterior motive, wouldn't you?
Right. Yeah.
And what would you value that ulterior motive at? Maybe a couple $100, right? Like, oh, it's worth going there. And you see what I'm saying?
Right,
So,
yeah.
so I'm trying to put a value on this. So if my union leader told me I should go to this thing, and while I'm not expressly told I have to, essentially the consequence of not going might be a worse shift. So how would you value that? Maybe I would value that as $500, right? Because if I didn't go, maybe the value of that worst shift would be $500, right? It will have lost value to me, right? So I'm very much okay with the idea that we should reveal our ulterior motives, but I'm not willing to do it unless everybody else will do it.
Okay. I just didn't know if I was the paid protester, if you try to say, hey, just say you're here for the event. Don't try to say I don't go, hey, I'm a paid protester. I don't know what I'm doing here. I just got handed a sign.
Well, I would hope that they wouldn't say that. Well,
because if I paid for it, I don't want the media be talking to these folks and then they're acting.
well, number one, to answer your question a little bit more directly, we're typically, well, our people are generally not told to proactively disclose that they're being compensated. Moreover, they're all people who agree and are passionate about the cause. So if they were interviewed by the media, they'd be able to articulate their position. That doesn't mean 100% of our people are going to be able to do it 10 out of 10, but it means that that's what we're going to provide, which, by the way, is much better than the randos that you see at most protests.
Correct. Is there a way that is there a way that you can ensure like government agencies or bad actors aren't getting infiltrated into your thing? Because here you just doing your business, and then someone comes up and they start trying to hijack your event. How do you? Is there any way that you can do that?
Interview people before participating, right? So each person, and by the way, this comes at like significant personal expense to me because our clients aren't even willing to kind of absorb all of these costs. But we interview people before every event. So we have typically a 15 to 20 minute interview, even if you've worked with us in the past, right? Before each event, discussing the views, discussing what the event is going to involve, and kind of outlining how it's going to go. So that is we can generally tell if somebody is wacky within that 15-minute conversation. People can't normally hide their true colors very well. And in the circumstances where people are not productive, then first of all, they don't get paid so that's a pretty big incentive. Second of all, we haven't really had any issues, but hypothetically, we would just kind of report them to law enforcement or kind of tell them to disassociate from us, right? Similar as anyone else would do. But I attribute it to our great team members that we have not really had this problem happen.
Well, that's good because, and I know, well, I speak about January 6th, there was seemed like shenanigans. Who knows what exactly was going down there. And that's why I asked if like you ever got that issue. When it comes to when you obviously work with both sides. Who do you think's more creative when it comes to, or does it depend?
Oh, the Republicans are more willing to do outside the box strategies.
Really?
The Democrats are actually kind of puritanic. Well, see, the Democrats used to be the fun party. So in the Obama era, right, we had Democrats who knew social media, knew fun tactics and all that. And Republicans were old and stodgy and unable to really effectively articulate, right? And they were so behind. It was like the AOL accounts and all that. But now in this era, I think you have Democrats who are wedded to traditional tactics of labor unions, celebrities, big donors, right? And I'm not saying Republicans don't have the same kind of general like play by the book approach in some cases, but they're more willing to take on to do things that are a little unconventional. So for example, one thing that merits examination is the idea of voter dissuasion. So voter dissuasion is different from voter suppression, right? Voter suppression is illegal, right? It's saying the election's next Wednesday when it's Tuesday, right? That's illegal. Voter dissuasion is the understanding that some people will never be convinced to vote for you, but they can be convinced not to vote for your opponent, or potentially to vote for a third party like yourself, right? So my opinion is Republicans have very effectively invested in voter dissuasion, particularly with groups that the Democrats have not served well, such as the blacks, right? So Black people overall, I think, are 80+% Democrats. Black women, 90% Democrat. So Republicans reckon, hey, if we can convince 20% of Black Democrat or Black voters to stay home, that'll help us a lot more than it'll help the other side. Basically, hey, neither side cares about our communities, right? Like, screw this. We're not going to participate in this kind of corrupt system. Both sides have hurt the people, right? So the interesting thing is Republicans haven't done shit for the rural communities, right? Go to rural America. The biggest, nicest buildings in a lot of towns are literally hospitals that are dealing with the influx of fentanyl, right? So this is Republicans failing to help their constituents, right? Just as Democrats, you go to any black majority neighborhood, for the most part, they're overrun with crime. Black people don't own anything in their community, right? It's shit, right? And black people will tell you that, right? Same thing with rural America, right? So, but my point is, when I've talked to Democrats, I know about voter dissuasion in rural America, they're like, oh my God, that would be so unethical. We should try to get them to be Democrats. Well, it's like, these people are not fucking going to be Democrats. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? They hate your guts. They hate what you stand for. They hate the trans thing. They hate your culture. They hate the celebrities. But you might be able to convince them that Trump hasn't done shit for them because he hasn't, right? So the Democrats are always obsessed with the idea of we have to win them over, right? Whereas the Republicans, I think, are more willing to understand, hey, maybe we'll win over some African American voters, but if we can just get some of them to stay home, then we can actually, that'll be our path to success, right? And and voter dissuasion is not unethical because it's the idea of saying truthfully, the people who you support haven't done shit for you, so don't support them anymore.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I've heard that if 8 or 9% was of the black community would start voting Republican, it would almost be always a Republican win.
Oh, correct. If
so it's just that small of amount.
Yeah. But what's been just as effective but less publicized is just convincing a lot of African Americans to just not vote, right? Because the thing is that the Republican Party has an awful name in the black community, just like the Democrat Party has an awful name among a lot of rural white voters, right? So there's a recognition to me that you're not going to have a lot of blacks voting Republican. I'm sorry, right? They think Republicans are racist, and I don't know, they're like, we're not going to talk about whether that's true or not, but they think Republicans are racist. But a lot of them also recognize that Democrats are racist and Democrats haven't done anything for them, right? So you might be able to convince them not to vote at all, which the effect would be of actually helping the Republicans. You see what I'm saying?
Right. One of the things with the libertarians, what we've got to do is, one, you got to get a little bit from the Republicans, a little bit from the Democrats. But my goal has always been, because for the most part, NOTA, which is none of the above, always wins the election. Even here, they stay home. More people stayed home in Virginia this past governor race than they actually came out and voted. So if I can convince people to come out, because neither party's given
and what you need to do for that is articulate a real vision. You have to articulate that you can win, or articulate a real vision of what they're voting for. So even if they don't think you can win, they know what their vote is standing for, right? And I think that's important. And I think more people, I think, should vote third party as a protest vote in a lot of cases if they're not satisfied. Because my question is, has someone earned your vote? A vote is earned. It's not owed, it's earned, right? And in so many cases, I don't feel like either candidate has earned the vote. Now, what you have to do as a libertarian is you have to earn the vote. They don't owe you the vote any more than they owe the Republicans or the Democrats, and you're at a disadvantage because they already are kind of like, well, if I vote for this guy, it's a throwaway vote. Well, if they are throwing away their vote, what are they saying if they vote for you and you don't win?
Right. And then we always do, what I try to do is always say, look, if we get 10% of the vote here, we become a major party. We don't have to collect signatures.
I mean, the American system of government is sort of stacked against multi-parties, right? Because so in a lot of countries that have parliamentary systems, if you could, and that don't have one seat per district, right? Then you could start winning seats in Congress, and then you would be the balance of power. So then you could say, hey, we'll vote for the Republicans, but you could tell Mike Johnson, well, if you're continuing to endorse the Trump administration's overreach, we're going to support the Democrats. You see what I'm saying? You'd have that even if you had 10%, right? Which I think 10% of Americans probably are libertarians, if not more. I would say 10% Americans are probably hardcore libertarians, and another 10, 15% are probably like low-key libertarians, you know?
Yes, we could probably get up there like that, yeah.
I think so, because I know so many people are like, I'm a libertarian, but I ask them, have you ever voted for a libertarian? They say no, they don't have a chance, or they're too wacky.
That's the that's the fight we've had, because you get taught in school the wasted vote. They, the actual politicians, they work hand in hand. They trip over each other to make sure that the ballot access, that it's so hard for an independent. Look, I was talking about Larry Sharp. In 2018, he received enough percent to become a major party in New York. New York went into the state lawmakers, went into session. They passed the law and they moved the goalposts, and they said, you needed to make this percentage to be a major party. So, so they just moved the goalpost. So whenever I hear either party say that they're fighting for democracy,
no, absolutely not. Well, and in California, when they did the open primary system, which allows people who might have some support on Republican side and some on the Democratic side to run, the California Republican and Democratic parties both vociferously opposed it, right? So I think you need more of that, more of top two primaries, where someone like you could get 25% in the first round and advance to the top two, and then face a Republican or a Democrat and make the case against either one of them.
Right.
I think it's important. I think it's important. Even if you lose, you're still getting those ideas, and you're forcing them to justify why both parties have increased the deficit, increased debt, and expanded government, expanded presidential power, right? I mean, our president, it's not Trump, but all presidents are like kings in this country. They have more power than the King of England did probably when we separated from England in certain ways, right?
Right. When a candidate, they can purchase your service, or
Yes.
are they allowed? Do they have to indicate?
They're allowed to purchase our service, but typically we don't work with them.
Okay, because that's what I was going to ask, if it was a candidate or if it was like PACs.
It's more likely to come from external political organizations or 501c4s, like kind of advocacy groups, than from the candidate. There's nothing prohibiting the candidate from hiring us, but as a general fact, we're hired by issue groups, not candidates.
Okay. Has there ever been a time where a counter protester showed up and you didn't realize that your crowd was with you, or like they were counter protesting your crowd? Or
yeah, that happens all the time. And if it's respectful, I welcome it. Sometimes we already know that that's going to happen, by the way. A lot of times you go into it, it's a controversial issue. I'm like, I already know that there's going to be counter protesters. And that's fine. As long as it's respectful. My goal is to always work with the authorities and kind of create an environment that's pro-free speech. So if the counter protesters want to be there, that's great, as long as everyone keeps their distance and treats each other with respect.
All right. With what trends in activism or PR do you see in the next 3 to 5 years that will change your business?
Well, I'm curious how AI is going to change things in terms of being able to amplify things online, and how the deep fakes are gonna like potentially pervert the meanings of protests and stuff. So my real question is, will the AI deep fakes outsmart the companies, right? The platforms, the social media companies, and which is why I honestly think social media is like, in this era, needs to be deprived of their liability protection, because once they're deprived of their liability protection, then they're going to have to make sure that their platform like keeps some degree of deep fakes out. And that is because the misinformation thing is going to become a bigger issue if the platforms don't get on top of it. And to be very clear, I'm not arguing for censorship. I'm arguing for very objective, content neutral moderation.
I used Grok and I took a still picture and I had my two friends making out. And this guy is like 83 years old.
Yeah.
And when he saw it, if you were just to look at it and glance, you're thinking it looks like a real video.
That's correct. That's correct.
And that could change. So me and my buddy, coworker, we talk about it, and it's like we worry about like if a country and you start hearing, saber rattling and
right. If you see a speech from the president that says we're going to war, and even if half the country doesn't believe it, what about the other half? So it really does worry me. And I think that these companies really have to take it seriously, because at some point it's probably already caused death, but it's going to cause even more destruction on a grander scale. So that's the biggest concern I have in advocacy, is the prevalence of deep fakes and fake information to get out there. I don't support censorship, but I think that the stuff like specifically on Twitter, X, like some of this stuff out there is just wild. And the things that just pops into my feed are just wild fabrications or like completely like crazy stuff. So I think that we need to make sure that we rein that in.
Oh, and I don't know, like you want to be. I don't want to stop it because it's going to happen, but you got to figure out how do we control? Can we control it, or is it like the toothpaste? Once it's out of the tube, it's out of the tube. I'm in agreement with you, and I don't know, but I do. When I saw just that movement, and then I saw my buddy, he laughed, but at the same time, he was not finding it funny. If you could wave a magic wand, what's one service right now that you would like to see your company do? What it be online right now?
What we don't do. The one thing that we have not done much of is we haven't been as focused on social media, but it's something in demand for our clients. So it's one thing that we're looking into right now. We subcontract a lot of that, but I'd love to be able to do better in that department.
All right. And let's see, the final question that I've got here is, what advice would you give a 20-year-old today who wants to build something as unconventional as you did?
Start slow. Ideally, it's great if you're 20. That was the age I was when I started the company as well. So 20 is a great year because you can start while you're still in college, and the stakes are low, because if you fail, like, this is a great country where we respect someone who tries and fails. So try it while you're still in school. See if, try everything. If it doesn't work, then you can always move on. But it's much harder when you have a family, wife, kids, mortgage, to start something totally new and risk it all. Because what's great about starting a business in your early 20s is you're not risking as much. So you have more wiggle room to experiment with kind of crazy things. So I would say if you're 20 and thinking of something unconventional, like, dip your toes in the water and see what happens.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Brian.
Once again, this is Adam Swart from Crowds on Demand. You can go there to this link and you would be able to see. Let's see, there we go. You can read more about it. I think you do better in long form. I think everyone does even an hour, because like when you have only 4 minutes,
you just say the same thing. They say the same thing. It's and then you kind of you don't get a complete picture. I always like long form cable news. Always like there needs to be a little more confrontation, more like rather than being able to unpack things. So I love this format. I love chatting with you. Best of luck. And I love working with my libertarian friends to hold both parties accountable.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So thank you. And I heard you talked to Bubba the Love Sponge yesterday, I believe. He announced it on his radio show. So I look forward to hearing some more from there. All right, my friend.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on. And for everyone else, thank you for listening. As I said before, please go to MaximumLibertarian.com. That's how you can help the channel. And you can go over to the Libertarian Party of Virginia, lpva.org or rblp.org to find out more information about us. Join the party, break the two-party system up, and let's be free. So until next time, my friends, have a good night.